The Human Loop podcast, powered by Ethereum.
One thing that I found interesting when we talked previously was you were talking about like the knowing doing gap, and it landed for me again as well. So if possible, if you could perhaps sort of kind of share a bit more about what that is and what that looks like.
Yeah. So there's there are two types of leadership problems that I think you can categorize. One is don't know and are making loads of mistakes because we don't know what we don't know. All right. And the other one is what I see more typically with leaders who have got some experience and some reps leading people is they know what to do, or they have the knowledge, they understand like how a one-to-one should work, they understand how to coach people, how to give feedback, but they're just not doing it consistently. And there's this gap between knowing it and actually having the processes and the systems and the behaviours ingrained to create consistency. And when we're leading people, consistency and transparency build trust. And trust is the most important currency you have as a founder or an early stage leader, because the people you're hiring are trusting that you're going to look after their careers and they're going to go on this great kind of development journey, etc. And so if we know what we should be doing, and we're listening to podcasts and coming to events and reading books, etc., but we're not doing it, then there's something going on here. And the bit in the middle is where, for me, I've learned recently that workshops and coaching and seminars and stuff are great to a point for awareness and understanding. But actually what we really need as leaders is we need like reps and feedback on an ongoing basis. So the challenge that I've been facing, I guess, for like the last year and wrestling with is how, as founders, as leaders, how do we get feedback on what we're doing on an ongoing basis all the time to get better so that we actually know we're doing the right stuff. Otherwise, we can just keep going down the wrong direction. Yeah. But in those quiet moments where we're not tired, fatigued, etc., we go, I know how to do situational leadership. I read that book. Like, I know that. Yeah. But actually, when I'm applying it, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. The concept of reps like definitely lands. I think for me personally, it's knowing and doing are two different things, and I guess that's the challenge. And we'll perhaps come on to a bit more about this with regards to Ethereum and how that feedback loop might well be helping. In terms of performance, the other thing, me as a small business owner, I'm always very mindful of my energy and the energy I'm bringing into the business, to the team and stuff like that. And does energy as a leader link to performance, or does it not matter at all? What does that look like when you're building a high performing team?
It's a great question. I'm going to ask the room a question. Right? I need your interaction here. Okay, I want you to think about a leader or a manager who you've worked for who had really good positive energy. All right, just think about that person. Okay, have you got them? All right, how did they make you feel? How did that make you feel day to day? Someone give me some answers. Inspired? Okay. Pardon? That was mine. Inspired, okay. So we've had 3 inspired. What else? Energized. Heard, energized. Respected. Valued. Motivated. Okay, we'll stop there. That's too many. Okay, that's good. All right, so what you've just described is an artifact. It's an artifact of the relationship that you had or have with that other human being. That has left a feeling with you, right? Now think about someone else. I hope we don't have any managers and team members in this room. Think about someone else who was terrible to work for, right? They were autocratic, or they just weren't there, etc. How did that make you feel? Boxed, like boxed in. Yeah, okay, great. What else? Bored. Sorry, Dave. Okay.
That was not about me.
What else? Couple more. 2 more. Demotivated and frustrated. Okay, so you are hanging on to those artifacts. All right, they stay with you. So the answer to your question, like how much does the leader's energy and persona matter? It matters way more than we think. And when we look at the research and the science behind like herd mentality and tribalism and creating a movement, actually what we take so many cues from the person in authority in the room or the person in authority on the Zoom call. So the way I think about it with leaders or founders is you can either be a thermostat or a thermometer. All right. If you're a thermometer and you go onto a call or a meeting or you're interacting with your team and you're like checking the temperature, you will always fall to the lowest denominator of the person on the call or in the room, right? Because you don't want to rock the boat. As a leader, no matter how hard it is for you, whether you're introverted or extroverted or tired or fatigued, you set the temperature. You're the thermostat. So you decide the energy of that team simply by how you are perceived. Now, there's a bit here about being authentic. Being authentic is really, really important. I'm not saying you need to be super bouncy all the time. But what I am saying is that actually you need to be aware of the energy you give off, because the energy you give off is contagious. And as we've just exhibited here, it sticks around with people over time. And some of the words you used will be with leaders that you work with now, maybe. Some of them will have been years ago. All right. My feedback example has stuck with me for 7 years. All right. And whenever someone says feedback to me, I still think stars and shining as bright.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
so does that answer your question?
Mate, that is absolutely nailed my question. The crisp analogy is gone.
Oh,
I'm a thermostat, man.
Yes.
That is what it's
Turn it
all
up.
about. We're a room full of thermostats. That's what we are. But no, seriously, like, absolute gold. Okay. Like it resonates so strongly with me, and I'm hoping everyone in here, you've got to be mindful of this on the next Zoom call you join, aren't you? Whether you're directly managing people in your team or not, like let's control the temperature. So it makes a lot of sense. In terms of that, then it definitely then brings in an element of self-leadership. Mm-hmm. In terms of being a good people leader, you have to demonstrate good self-leadership and how that plays. And I guess also, as you've touched on earlier, you're aware under pressure or in certain situations, your behaviours change. So again, you clearly are demonstrating good self-leadership there. How does that self-leadership piece play out? And how does that change if you are in a high pressure or stressful situation?
Are you asking what I'm like at my worst?
No. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just had a flashback to 4 years ago when I talked about 3 ships. So for me in leadership, there are 3 ships. There's self-leadership, teamship, and followership. All right. So to be a leader in your toolkit, you need to be good at self-leadership. You need to role model, because believe it or not, your team are watching you the whole time. All right, when you're at your best and when you're at your worst. All right, so it's so hard because you are being scrutinized no matter what you do. And that's really important. So you need to be authentic, but also you need to really think about how you give feedback to people, how you talk to people, do you react emotionally, or are you able to take a breath and respond? Do you jump in to save the day? Because actually, if you jump in to save the day with your team, you become a single point of failure rather than agency, like creating agency. One of my team's least favorite questions that I ask them, no matter how many people I've led before, is what would you do if I wasn't here? All right? They hate it, absolutely hate it. But it is the answer to removing me as the point of failure in their decision-making and problem solving. So we've got a problem, what would you do if I wasn't here? And they'll look at me like, Ben, you're a dick. All right, why are you asking that question again? But actually, after a few reps of that, we then have a micro coaching conversation, and then they stop coming to me with, I've got this problem. They come to me with, Ben, we've got this problem, and here's a couple of potential solutions. All right, so that self-leadership bit, resisting being the subject matter expert all the time, even if you know the answer, is really important from a self-leadership bit. So there's role modeling. Then there's seeing yourself as a coach and an enabler of other people rather than the superhero in the team. And then the last bit is vulnerability. Like, actually, don't be a professional robot. And I learned this the hard way when I was working for England Rugby. I was like early 20s. I got my first team, and I inherited a team who were all like 10 years older than me. 4 of them 10 years older than me. I was like, hey, I'm a manager. I need to be corporate and professional and etc. And actually just didn't work. We didn't connect on a human level. And I had a conversation with my manager, and she was like, when I observe you talking to everyone else, you're like this, but with your team, you're like really formulaic and like it's like it feels a bit clunky. I'm like, well, I've got to create some professional distance with my team. And she was like, you can do that in other ways than just being an arse, basically, and being really aloof. And so you've got to be you. You've got to be you, because otherwise they will see through this professional facade as well.
Yeah, amazing. I think the other thing is, like, when you're leading people, like, people have awareness. They're not stupid. So, you may be saying one thing, but they know a different situation. So there's got to be that realness, I think, in terms of what you're delivering, because people they understand it. They're aware.
Yeah, completely. And also, if you are saying one thing and they observe you doing anything, then, and I've interviewed a bunch of like individual contributors in businesses and leaders, and the biggest thing that's come out that destroys like discretional effort and engagement is when they observe their leader doing something in a different way that they've kind of instructed or asked or coached them to do it, particularly when the leader hasn't clocked that they've seen it. So if they observe a leader interacting kind of with their peers, leader to leader, in a different way to how they would expect their team to, then all of a sudden you get this fracture in culture, and it feels like leadership and the rest of the team. Whereas actually what you want to try and create is a unified approach to behaviour.
Amazing. I'm going to build on your reps approach. I love it. I love a system. So you've obviously talked about doing reps. I feel like there is an element of routine that could perhaps help founders or leaders. So my question that I wrote down here was, if you could build like one weekly routine into every founder or leader's calendar, what would it be? If you were going to block out a bit of time to do one particular thing weekly or whatever. Yeah.
Sleep.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Done.
Yes.
Sleep lots.
Yes.
This is like really resonating with me, because I just did some work with my coach today on this. So I'll practice what I'm learning through him as well, which is, the first thing is a leader's calendar should not be full. All right. So you need to protect time in your Outlook, in your Google, like to do some thinking and observation and leadership work. All right. Otherwise, you'll be like, oh, sorry, I've just got one busy week. That's fine. One busy week becomes a busy month, becomes a busy quarter. All of a sudden, you've lost 2 of your team members because they weren't getting any development, right? Or something's broken. So I'm not talking about like days out of your calendar, but moments where actually you're observing the behaviours you want to observe or the metrics you want to observe that tells you that your team or the individual you're leading is performing in the way you would expect them to be performing. Right? I'm trying to keep this quite high level, all right? But whatever that might be, the only way I have found with people to be able to do that is to proactively block that time out in their calendar, right? And even then, I'm terrible at going, I'll just slip that meeting in to that as well. So that's then about like co-accountability. So if you've got someone you can be accountable with on that, who's got access to your calendar and is like, I saw you sneak that client meeting or that investor meeting in over that period, like don't do that again. So blocking some time out, and that time's about, observing and looking to analyze the performance and the well-being of your team, because you can't intervene, you can't lead and coach if you don't know what you need to be coaching around or leading around. And then the last bit is some reflection time. Who does any self-reflection at the moment on a regular basis? Hands up. Okay, cool. A smattering of us. So at the end of your week, like look back at your calendar, because that is the history of what you've actually done, right? Look back and look and see, like, actually, like if you were to run that week again, what would you stop doing, right? So what in that calendar would you have gone like, that was a waste of time, right? Or actually that sucked up a load of energy that I didn't need it to suck up, or I drifted off mission and I said yes to something I should have said not yet to, or no. So what would you stop? What would you start? So what is in there that actually, what's missing? What's missing? You know where you're going to, what you're trying to achieve this quarter, etc. What's missing? And then what's the good stuff in there? Give yourself a pat on the back and go, I should continue doing this stuff because that was really good. And actually, again, if you've got a co-founder or someone else you can do this with, it's brilliant because you can kind of look at each other's calendars. That takes you 15 minutes on a Friday, all right? I do mine on a Sunday night, all right? Kids go down, I look at the week and I'm like, right, what mistakes have I made that I've let trickle in, all right? Actually, what do I need to be better at? And the whole idea is we're making like micro changes in our ways of working and experimenting. Like you might make some changes and you'll be like, yeah, that didn't work, right? But the whole of our way of working as founders and as leaders is we're running micro experiments to test a hypothesis that we can have a better week next week. We can have a more productive week next week. We can have a better mental health week next week. We can support our teams better next week. And if we carry on that experimentation process and we learn from it, so we kind of plan, do, review, then we will see marginal gains or 1% gains or increases over time. You might not experience it in a week or in a month, but I guarantee when you look back over a couple of quarters at your calendar then to what it is now, what you're looking for is more control over your time. And if you've got more control over your time, you can make smarter decisions. And ultimately, everyone in this room is paid for making smart decisions. So whether you're paid by a customer, an investor, or an employer, we're paid on the caliber of the decisions we make. And if we can create more space to make those decisions, then that's going to be a better outcome for everyone.
Resonates. I saw a few nodding heads there and taking that time for the reflection piece and actually being structured with the reflection piece makes sense. I think, for me personally, I think, oh yeah, I'm reflective. I think about, but actually like lock it in, review, change, micro changes, and then it compounds. So yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just talking about culture, and then I'm bringing it right up to date. So as mentioned at the start, Ben is building Ethereum. He is bringing all of this goodness that you are seeing in front of you now to be that kind of constant feedback loop through AI, through technology. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. But just before we do, again, one thing, believe it or not, we prep for this stuff. So we had a prep meeting. And I think in the prep meeting, I said to Ben, when you're building West Peak, why do people come to you? What's the most common situation or whatever? And I think at the time you were kind of saying one of the most common things is like cultural problems. As you're scaling a company, things get out of line. So I guess in terms of that, how important is your company culture, your team's culture? And I'm going to roll it all into one so we can get onto Ethereum. But if you start to notice that the culture is not how you want it or it's starting to cause problems, what do you do? Where do you start? If trust is broken, can you get it back? So yeah, culture in 2 minutes.
Culture is the flavour of your crisps.
Got it. Okay. Ethereum.
No. It's like culture. Like culture is everything. So even when you think about like hybrid teams, which are part human, part agent now, and I know I work with businesses where they've got agents that have job titles, roles and responsibilities, they're on the org chart, etc. And so people are leading very 21st century teams. But I will come back to my definition of culture is that it's the artifact of the relationships in the business. All right. So really, you can only taste culture, crisps. You can only taste culture afterwards. It's the artifact of the relationships that people are having in that team. So therefore, how can you assess it? Well, historically, you'd assess it with like engagement surveys, 360 feedback, etc. Those are great and important, and that gives you a line in the sand of how people have contributed to say this is what we think our culture is internally. I would argue that actually if you went to your customers or your investors and your suppliers and said, what do you think the culture of our business is? Actually, they would give you a really interesting insight into what do you think we live up to in terms of values. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really interesting experiment to do. If you've tried to set a culture, like our culture is, we are energetic, go-getting, whatever, audacious. That's audacious is one of our Ethereum values. if you set that and you don't get it, then you need to reverse engineer and be like what's happened here? And actually, I think culture is an organic thing that changes the minute you add more people. All right. So I use a business that I worked with like 4 years ago. I met them when they were 200 people. 200 people. They had a small office in Bristol, and then their dev teams were in the Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania. They got private equity investment. They started onboarding 100 people a month. Okay, they started hiring and onboarding 100 people a month. 200 people to start with. Right. By month 2, half the people in that business had a completely different culture to the original culture. That business had been going for 12 years.
Yeah.
Right. I'm working with the C-suite, and they're like, the business feels very different. I'm like, yeah, funny that.
Yeah.
Okay. And actually, they ended up being 1,000 people in like 18 months. But what we then had to do some work on is actually, what are the pillars that underpin the culture? It's the behaviours of the leaders that get observed day to day. That's the pillars that underpin that culture. So actually what we needed to do was make sure that those leaders are exhibiting the behaviours and leading people and developing people and hiring people that would enrich the DNA, and that culture would evolve in the right direction. If your culture gets like broken and it's gone wrong, you know, of like a toxic environment, and I'm sure we can all think about organizations where that's been observed, like you're gonna have to have a restart from the top down and the bottom up. So you can see a lot of that starting to trickle out in like Glassdoor reviews. Like if you look at Glassdoor reviews for businesses that have grown really quickly, a lot of the time they get quite bad, because businesses that grow really quickly and scale really quickly in terms of headcount kind of lose coordination. They lose, the systems break, the processes break, and they look like a teenager that's had a growth spurt. They can't catch the balls anymore. So actually what you need to do is re-get that coordination. And that comes down to a lot of change management and a lot of investment in time about, do our ways of working still fit?
Yep.
Do we know how to onboard people? Do we give feedback in the way that it's expected here? Or has that completely changed?
Yeah. I bet you the very top of these companies is the hardest conversations when you walk in.
So it's an easy conversation because in a scale-up business, the founders and CEOs go, yeah, we know we have a leadership problem. It's here. It's always here. It's never here.
Yeah.
All right. And that's fine. Like that's just human, isn't it? Like we've promoted a bunch of people. They're not very good managers because they've never done it before. They are right. They are right. Those people need upskilling and investment to know how to lead people. They've never done it before. But actually, it's also here. It's also the buck stops with the CEOs, the founders who have made the decision. So generally, what we end up doing is working team leader level, and then you get upwards pressure and quality of behaviours. And then the C-suite comes to the table and go, actually, can we have some of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Help us.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. We are now talking Ethereum. So,
Cool.
First of all, what is Ethereum?
What is Ethereum? So Ethereum so I have had an in-person leadership development business for 5 years. We've created bespoke programs to help train and develop managers and leaders. So basically 80% of managers, data tells us that 80% of managers have never had any training or development on how to lead another human being. 80%. That's mad, okay? But it happens. It happens in business because we are 99% perform and 1% potentially invest in development because we need to perform every day. So with Westpeak, we got maximum of 6 days contact time with a leader or manager ever. All right, so maybe 6 days of some upskill, some coaching, etc. So what happens to the other circa 300, high 280s, 300 days of holidays? And that I've wrestled with that for like the last 3 years. How do we help managers day to day away from workshops? And the forgetting curve basically tells us that the minute someone walks out of learning something new, if they haven't applied it and done the reps and got feedback within 72 hours, they lose something like 30 to 40% of that knowledge. All right. So I felt really bad that businesses were investing in training their leaders. we were doing the best we could, then they'd walk out the door and we get this kind of forgetting curve. And we try and embed it with coaching, etc. But you can't give everyone executive coaching 24/7. So beginning of last year, I was messing about with like ChatGPT and Claude, and I was like, this is awesome. This is really, really cool. Like, I wonder whether we can go really far upstream in business communications. And I wonder whether we can build something that analyzes all digital communications within a business and then provides managers proactive coaching in the flow of their work on how well they're leading their teams and how engaged their teams are in real time right now. That was my idea with Ethereum. And I'm not a technical person. So I went to a CTO that I know really well, which is Dan, who's my CTO. And I said to him, I've got this idea. Like, is it possible? Can we tap into all digital communication? And then can we use AI to analyze this in real time? And he was like, the tech is easy. I was like, great. The behavioral science is hard. All right, because actually we then need to create novel algorithms to analyze, like, how do you analyze engagement from Teams messages, Slack messages, emails, calendar insights? And so I've got a mentor who was head of organizational behavior at London Business School for 27 years. He's now at Kellogg in Chicago. And I spent the last 9 months with him building these algorithms that power Ethereum. So what Ethereum does now is we've got over 200 managers using Ethereum day in, day out. And what it does is it gives them an early warning system and a heads up on how engaged every member of their team is in real time. It provides them that knowing, doing, kind of closing the gap bit. It gives them feedback on how well they're leading their team. Both affirmational, so it does say well done from time to time, do more of that, as well as corrective feedback on their language sentiment or how well they're leading their team in relation to their business's mission, vision, values, and cultural behavioral norms. So you could have a high-performing business in, like, Save the Children, for example. A high-performing leader in Save the Children would look very different to a high-performing leader in Goldman Sachs, for example. All right, because every business has their own cultural norms, their own flavor of leadership. So yeah, what we've basically done is put Yoda on the shoulder of every manager everywhere. And my mission is to democratize leadership development and have Ethereum used by 10 million managers in the next 3 years. So we're at 200. So I've got a few to go.
I believe.
Yeah,
I believe it's coming. And I think the reason I believe is because I think it speaks to the room. You know, I think anyone leading people values feedback. Anyone leading people wants to be a better leader. And if someone in real time could give you that constructive feedback, the affirmations, the things to work on, I think we'd all say, yes, I want it. But the problem is exactly as you've described, of I haven't got time, or I can block out 2 days to go on a course, but then I forget all about it because I'm too busy focusing on performance. So it makes loads of sense. In terms of what you're measuring then, if you can't share too much, don't feel you need to. But in terms of that, what are the typical kind of metrics that you're looking at, or you're getting Ethereum to look at to know if a manager is performing?
Yeah, so I can't go into our patent pending algos, but we basically measure, so dynamic employee engagement is one of our algorithms, it's one of the measures, which is effectively how do we measure engagement in real time in an organization. Now, so we integrate into all digital communications within that business, so emails, calendar, Slack, Teams, HR platforms, CRMs. That gives us a wealth of data points, and then what we're able to do is we're able to analyze like language sentiment analysis, we're able to analyze frequency of communications, interpersonal and intrapersonal changes over time. Calendar density is really interesting. Like the insights we're getting from calendar density and fluctuations in that through managers and through teams is very insightful. That then builds into a leadership development index score. So every manager now has a quantitative measure of how well they are leading their team members in line with how the business wants them to. Which enables like an organizational leader, like an HR director or a COO, to be able to look at all of their leaders in real time and understand which ones might need some support and help because their team engagement is really high, but their leadership development score is actually quite low. So we know now where the extra help and support is needed for managers and leaders versus like basically the way that leadership development and management has been measured before is your team producing? Are they achieving their KPIs? And let's do a 360 and an engagement survey. And engagement surveys that are questionnaire based generally get two types of people answering them. One is people that've got an axe to grind. The other one is the people who want a promotion. So you get that mixed middle, and most engagement surveys are about 40% kind of completion rate.
Mate, I love it. It's good, man. It's good. I'm going to ask. I don't think it's a hard question, but I'm guessing it's a question that you do perhaps get. Like perhaps as you're first talking to people, managers, thinking, is this surveillance? Mm-hmm. Like, am I being watched by Big Brother? Etc. So, how do you answer that one if someone's monitoring every email, every Slack?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first answer is that's happening anyway. Just to be clear, everyone's Microsoft 365 incidents is recorded. Like everyone who signs an employment contract is signing that their business communications are available for that business at any time. So that is already happening. The point here is, I think, around like I'm under no illusion that we are probably quite early adoption in terms of technology like this to enable the performance and well-being of leaders and their teams. The way that Ethereum is set up is it's not set up to make like HR decisions, hiring, firing, promotions. It's set up to actually help managers who are struggling. So like being a manager and a leader or a founder with a team, like you're the most overworked, under-resourced, under-invested in person in that organization. And managers at the moment, when you look at the Gallup research, are the most overwhelmed group of people in an organization. Couple that with you've got more hybrid, more disparately spread teams, it's much harder for a manager to understand how engaged their team members are. And so one example that kind of sums up where we're at with adoption is I had a conversation with an HR director about 4 months ago, so just before Christmas, and was talking to her about Ethereum, and she was like, I get it, I like it. You're probably 18 months away from our culture and our organization being ready for something like this in terms of like people's expectations of AI fused into our ways of working. I had a call with her 2 months later. All right, call with her 2 months later. Her Fireflies note taker joined before she did. And I said to her, I was like, talk to me about this. And she said, we've rolled it out across the whole company. I don't even go to all of my meetings anymore. I get it transcribed. Yeah. And I was like, right, let's have another conversation about Ethereum. And she was like, yeah, the time is right. So there's definitely a part in an organization's life cycle where Ethereum is really impactful. And I think for businesses who are a first-time founder with a small team, like actually it's a really accessible tool to be able to mitigate retention risks or, understand engagement and how well you're leading your team. Later stage scale-up organizations and enterprise, they are investing in Ethereum because actually there's massive kind of productivity gains to be made. And it really supports managers who might have team members who are spread out across the world as well.
Amazing. Awesome stuff. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I will open it up. If anyone has any questions for Ben, if there is any burning issues while we have him, thank you, sir, please. I'm going to repeat that back for the purpose of YouTube. Smile away. We're asking for tips about finding co-founders.
Yeah. Sorry, what was your name? Paul. So I would firstly, I would go to my network. So I would go to my first degree network. Like, who do I know? Maybe not family, but who do I know? Who do I know, and what am I looking for? So what is my ideal founder persona? Like, what do they look like? What do they have that I don't, that they can bring to the party? Once I understand that persona, I'd go out to my network, and then I'd go out to my network's network, and I'd go that way first. And then I would look at the marketplace or the problem. Where is the problem that we're answering being experienced? And I'd go and maybe look for subject matter experts or people in that environment who are interested in solving the same problem. Because having someone who's a co-founder with you, who's experienced the pain, will give you really good insights into your first customers but also they're probably networked with people in your ICP that you might want as well. So there are diamonds in your network, like there are diamonds in all of our networks. We might just need to go one or two removed from our immediate network and ask, but also go to where you think the problems are you want to solve, and have conversations with some of those people.
I've got a couple of like super quick rapid fire ones, but was there any others in the room? Please, at the back there. Great question. What's the most underrated leadership skill?
Yeah, I'd say listening rather than hearing. And making sure that the person who you're leading understands that you've heard them. So very, very quickly, like actually repeating back to someone what they've just said to you and asking them whether you heard them correctly is a really powerful way to hear it in your head again and process it. But I would definitely say listening.
Amazing stuff. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so I whittled it down to 3 things because I'm quite excited about the space. But firstly, I'll say the answers are only as good as the questions. So well done to both of you.
Yeah, thanks.
One is a statement, which is you were talking about how do you provide feedback upwards.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that I learned from one of my old companies in terms of their values is the obligation to dissent. And once you instill the obligation to dissent in all of your employees, they will naturally dissent, not just to their clients, they need to push back, but also in terms of leadership. And it creates that open culture. So maybe that's one thing that I just wanted to share with you.
Yeah.
Another one is a personal question. Did you ever have an identity crisis when you realized that you weren't going to become a rugby player, or when COVID hit and you lost your job? So that's the personal side of things.
Okay.
But I'll let you answer that first before I answer.
Cool.
Before I
Question
Did I have an
is-
identity crisis?
Yeah.
Okay, so did I have an identity crisis when I realised I wasn't going to be a rugby player? No to both, and I think that probably comes down to when I realised I wasn't going to be a rugby player. I was just young and naive and probably a bit arrogant, and so it was a bit like water off a duck's back. But then I had the opportunity of going straight into doing something in rugby anyway, so that kind of healed the wounds that were there. And then after COVID, when I started West Peak, I had felt like I had more to give in the leadership development space than I could do in that business anyway. Like I built a team who were doing a lot of the delivery, and I missed that contact time with people. So actually, I think I just felt more frustrated in the business, and actually setting up West Peak was probably a bit of a release, really.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. And then the next question is about, you were saying that your company is analysing managers and kind of bringing them up to the level of the objectives or the missions of the client. What happens if their development is not congruent with their personal development? Does that make sense? So if you're transitioning them to become leaders within the company's objectives, but it might transition away from their own personal objectives, is that something that you've considered, or perhaps is that something that maybe you're able to measure?
Yeah, okay, so my understanding of the question is like people have personal values and develop like personally, and what we're talking about with Ethereum is we onboard the business's values and we measure people against how well they're performing within the behaviours that are expected within that organisation. Cool. I think my short answer to that is business is generally about value creation. And if a business has kind of set out and co-agreed that these are the values and the behaviours that you expect within this organisation, then to a certain extent, you need to operate within the parameters of the organisation that you want to work in. So I think if your personal values are very different and contradictory to that business's values, then I'd probably argue that you're in the wrong organisation. And what Ethereum will highlight is it would highlight that earlier than someone who potentially is just disenfranchised within that organisation and ends up drifting, maybe becoming a bit toxic, etc., and ultimately isn't in a place where they're going to thrive or the business is going to thrive.
Amazing stuff. Amazing.
Thank you.
For me, I'm going to draw things to a close here, but it was one little piece just in the middle of all of that good stuff. But you kind of called out that actually in 99% of organisations, leaders are very focused on like performance, and like doing, like ticking stuff off, getting stuff produced or whatever. And the takeaway for me, it's so clear in everything you've discussed today about the importance of development. You know, you've used coach so many times, and I think sometimes as a leader you can become very focused on hit this target, KPI, sell this much stuff, whatever. But actually as a leader, the takeaway for me in this is actually you're a coach first and foremost, and the importance of that development piece. So for me, you know, thank you for that. I've really enjoyed listening to you all night, and that's a massive takeaway for me personally. So if we could just end with a round of applause, please. For
Thank you.